Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where time is the only resource you can't buy back. You can lose money, rebuild it. You can lose opportunities, find new ones. You can lose people, and though it may scar you, you continue forward. But time doesn't negotiate. Time doesn't wait for your excuses, your delays, or your second chances. And when you start late in life, when you finally wake up to the reality that you've been standing still while the rest of the world has been moving, you're not just behind, you're at a disadvantage. You're playing catch up in a race where the starting gun went off long ago. And if you're the one who starts late, you don't get the luxury of jogging. You have to run twice as fast. Now, some of you sitting here might already feel that weight pressing against your chest. You may be thinking, I should have started earlier. I wasted years, I wasted opportunities. And the brain, being the master manipulator that it is, loves to serve you evidence of your failures. It will whisper, you're too old. You're too far behind. It's too late. But science tells us something different. The brain is not fixed. Neuroplasticity, the ability of your neural circuits to rewire, adapt, and expand, is proof that even when you start late, you can still accelerate. But let me be clear, adaptation is not comfortable. Rewiring a brain that has lived years in patterns of procrastination, self-doubt, and mediocrity is not easy. It requires force. It requires urgency. It requires you to run at a speed that frightens you. Think of it like this. A sprinter who stumbles at the start doesn't just keep the same pace and hope for the best. He pushes harder. He drives his legs with everything he has, not because he wants to, but because he must. If he doesn't, the race is lost before the first corner. Life is the same. You wasted your 20s, if you drifted through your 30s, if you slept through your 40s, you don't get to simply move forward at a casual pace in your 50s or 60s and hope life will balance itself out. No, you must run faster, twice as fast. And that demand feels unfair, doesn't it? But fairness has nothing to do with it. Biology doesn't care about fairness. The truth is that reality will always charge you double for delay. I once spoke to a man in his late 40s who had just woken up to his wasted years. For 2 decades, he worked in a job he despised, telling himself the story that one day he would start his own business. But that one day never came because he didn't understand the psychology of momentum. Every year he delayed, the hill grew steeper. By the time he reached out to me, he had health issues, financial obligations, and children depending on him. His dream was still alive, but he was 10 laps behind. And do you know what I told him? I didn't feed him comforting lies about balance or patience. I told him the truth. You've wasted years, and now you're gonna have to bleed for the years you lost. You're gonna have to outwork, outlearn, and out-execute the younger version of yourself that you abandoned. That conversation shook him, but it was the only way forward. This principle isn't only personal, it's universal. History is full of late starters who had to run at impossible speeds to catch up. Look at Colonel Sanders, who didn't franchise his first Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant until he was 62 years old. Do you think he moved at the pace of a retiree, easing into his golden years? No, he worked relentlessly, driving thousands of miles across America, pitching his recipe to restaurants again and again after being rejected hundreds of times. He had no time for excuses, he had to sprint. That's why his story inspires. Not because he started late, but because he understood that starting late meant doubling his effort. The same applies in neuroscience. If a person suffers a brain injury, their recovery depends on neuroplasticity. But here's the reality. Regaining lost function isn't easy. The brain doesn't naturally rebuild overnight. Patients must engage in therapy with intensity, repeating exercises hundreds, even thousands of times to rebuild neural pathways. They don't just stroll through recovery. They fight for every inch of progress, and they fight harder than someone who never lost the function in the first place. They must run twice as fast just to stand where others already stand. This is life in its purest form. If you fall behind, the climb back demands more effort, more speed, and more grit. Let's bring this closer to you. Imagine you are sitting here today realizing you've been living on autopilot. You've been coasting, surviving, not truly living. And suddenly it hits you. Years have passed, maybe decades. You've been waiting for permission, for certainty, for confidence, for the right time. But there is no right time. The only time is now. The price of waiting has already been charged to your account and the interest is compounding. So what do? You sprint. You run as though the floor beneath your feet is on fire. You compress decades into years. You learn faster, decide faster, act faster. You must, because the late starter has no other choice. Science backs this urgency. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, responds not only to achievement, but also to speed of progress. When you move quickly, when you take massive action, your brain floods with dopamine, reinforcing the behavior. But when you delay, when you procrastinate, your brain adapts to inaction, and inertia sets in. This is why people who wait often keep waiting. Their neural circuits have been trained to tolerate stagnation. The late starter doesn't have time to let those circuits dictate their future. They must shock the system. They must create an internal revolution of speed. Some of you will resist this message. You'll think, but isn't slow and steady better? Isn't balance important? Balance is for those who started on time. Balance is for those who built momentum early and can now coast on the compound interest of their earlier decisions. But if you're behind, balance will bury you. Slow and steady will not save you. You need acceleration, obsession, and relentless pursuit. This doesn't mean neglecting your health or destroying your relationships. It means rejecting mediocrity, cutting away time wasters, and living with a level of urgency that others will call extreme. Think about the tortoise and the hare. People love that story because it comforts them. Slow and steady wins the race. But what they don't tell you is that the tortoise didn't start late. The tortoise started on time. If the tortoise had started 10 minutes after the hare, no matter how steady he was, he would have lost. That's the truth that no one tells you. If you start late, slow and steady is suicide. You must run faster. And here's where the emotional weight comes in. Because running faster doesn't just mean working harder, it means confronting pain, it means facing regret, it means admitting to yourself that you've wasted time you'll never get back. And that's hard. People would rather live in denial than face the truth of wasted years. But denial doesn't erase the debt. Regret is a tax. You either pay it with tears today or you pay it with despair tomorrow. Now, I know this is heavy, but it's also liberating. Because once you accept that you must run twice as fast, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop wasting energy asking, why me? Why so hard? And instead, you direct that energy into forward motion. And when you do, something incredible happens. The very pressure of being behind becomes the fuel that drives you further than those who started early, because urgency sharpens focus. Urgency strips away distractions. Urgency makes you dangerous. Think about the immigrant who arrives in a foreign country with nothing. No language skills, no money, no network. They start behind everyone else. And yet many of them succeed wildly. Why? Because they know they can't afford to stroll, they run. They take jobs others won't. They save every dollar. They work nights while learning the language by day. They run twice as fast because they have no safety net. And their children often end up thriving in ways that those born with comfort never do. Starting late, starting behind, starting disadvantaged. It forces you to unlock gears you didn't even know you had. Ladies and gentlemen, the one who starts late must run twice as fast. That's not a punishment, it's an invitation. An invitation to shed the illusions of comfort. An invitation to discover what you're truly capable of when there's no time to waste. An invitation to live with intensity, urgency, and purpose. And when you accept that invitation, you don't just catch up. You leapfrog those who wasted their head start. Because while they were pacing themselves, you were sprinting. While they were managing, you were multiplying. While they were comfortable, you were hungry. And hunger beats comfort every single time. Hunger is the ultimate catalyst for transformation. Neuroscience shows us that when survival is at stake, the brain recruits resources it otherwise leaves dormant. Under threat, your body releases adrenaline, sharpening your senses and amplifying your focus. Under pressure, your brain bypasses hesitation and defaults to action. Hunger activates circuits in your midbrain that override comfort and complacency This is why the one who starts late has a hidden advantage. While others may drift, you are forced to burn with urgency. That urgency, if harnessed, can drive you into realms of performance you would have never touched had you started comfortably on time. But let's be brutally honest. Hunger only matters if it's converted into consistent execution. Too many people mistake desperation for action. They feel the weight of lost time, they get emotional, they declare they'll change, but then they collapse into the same patterns that wasted their years in the first place. The gap between emotional awakening and disciplined execution is where most people die with regret. Your brain doesn't care about your intentions, your tears, or your declarations. It only rewires itself through action. Neurons that fire together wire together. Repetition engraves habit, habits engrave destiny. It's not philosophy, it's biology. Think about someone learning a new skill later in life. Say a person in their 50s learning a new language. The child who starts at age 5 has a natural advantage. Their brain is primed for language acquisition. But the adult, they must work harder. They must immerse themselves, practice daily, engage in exercises that feel uncomfortable and awkward. But the adult who does this, who trains with intensity, can surpass even those who had an early start but never maintain momentum. That's the paradox of starting late. If you sprint, you can outpace those who walked early. Now consider health. Imagine someone who ignored their health for decades, living sedentary, eating poorly, letting their body decay. By the time they're in their 40s or 50s, their metabolism is slower, their joints ache, their cardiovascular system is under strain. They don't have the luxury of gradual change. If they want to regain vitality, they can't afford half measures. They must go all in. Rigorous exercise, disciplined nutrition, aggressive lifestyle changes. The margin of error is gone. They must run twice as fast as the person who maintained their health from youth, and though it's harder, though it feels unfair, the reward is equally profound. Because nothing tastes as sweet as reclaiming what you once thought was lost. The same is true in business. Look at entrepreneurs who start in their 50s or 60s. They don't have decades to experiment. They don't have the margin to wander aimlessly. They must make decisions quickly, learn aggressively, and execute without hesitation. And often, because of that urgency, they succeed faster than young founders who drown in options and waste time. Necessity cuts away indecision. The late starter, if serious, becomes efficient by force. But here's where science and spirit intersect. When you push yourself into high intensity, when you demand more of your brain and body than they've ever given, you create what neuroscientists call hormetic stress. This is the same principle that explains why muscles grow after resistance training or why the immune system strengthens after exposure to challenges. Stress, applied in the right dose, is not destructive, it's transformative. The late starter is forced to live under hormetic stress, and if they endure, they come out stronger, sharper, and more resilient than they would have if life had been easy. Yet none of this matters if you still cling to excuses. Excuses are the great and aesthetic. They numb the pain of regret just enough to keep you stagnant. They seduce you with lies. I'll start tomorrow. I'm too old. I'm too busy. It's not fair. Excuses are comforting stories that protect your ego but kill your potential. And the tragedy is that while you tell yourself these stories, time keeps running. The debt grows larger, the gap grows wider, the race moves on. And every day you delay, the demand to run faster only increases. Now, let me share something raw. I once sat with a man in his 60s who broke down in tears because he realized he had lived a life of almosts. Almost pursued his dream, almost built his business, almost became the person he knew he could be. But every time he chose the excuse over the execution. And now, sitting in front of me, he admitted the truth. I can't run twice as fast anymore. I can barely walk. That moment shattered me. Not because he was weak, but because he finally saw the cost of delay. And if his story can serve as a warning for you, let it. Because one day, if you keep waiting, you will run out of days to run. So what do you do with this truth? You embrace the sprint. You cut out everything that doesn't move you forward. You stop negotiating with laziness. You build systems around you that force momentum. You surround yourself with people who challenge you instead of coddle you. You stop living like you have time to waste, because you don't. The urgency that you feel, that knot in your stomach when you realize you've been behind, is not something to run from. It's your greatest ally. Use it. Understand that the brain loves speed. The faster you act, the more momentum you build, the more dopamine you release, and the more the cycle reinforces itself. The late starter who sprints with obsession can generate exponential results because urgency collapses time. You don't learn at the same pace when you're desperate, you learn faster. You don't execute at the same pace when you're on fire, you execute relentlessly. Urgency is the multiplier. Some of you might think this message is ruthless. And it is, because life is ruthless. Time is ruthless. But there's also hope here. The hope is that no matter how late you start, no matter how much you've wasted, if you're willing to run twice as fast, you can still rewrite your story. The only people who are truly finished are the ones who stop running altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is simple. If you start late, you must run twice as fast. Not because it's fair, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. And if you do, if you embrace that intensity, you will discover capacities within yourself that you never imagined. You will find that the very lateness you once cursed becomes the engine of your greatness. And one day, when others look at you and wonder how you achieved so much in so little time, you'll know the answer. Because you ran twice as fast when it mattered most. The race of life is not measured in years alone, it is measured in intensity. And that is the gift hidden in starting late. You no longer have the luxury of half-hearted attempts. You no longer have the cushion of wasted days. You are forced into intensity, and intensity is where greatness is forged. Look back at anyone who has truly changed the world, and you will notice something striking. They were not casual. They did not dabble. They did not flirt with their vision. They consumed it, and it consumed them. Let me take you into the science of why this works. The brain, when pushed to extremes, releases norepinephrine, sharpening alertness, boosting memory, heightening awareness. Pair that with dopamine, which rewards effort and progress, and you create a feedback loop that accelerates growth. When you live with urgency, when you force yourself into uncomfortable speed, your nervous system adapts. The circuits that once favored hesitation and delay weaken. The circuits that drive rapid decision-making strengthen. You literally reprogram your biology to match the demands of your late start. The very act of running twice as fast creates a brain wired for velocity. Now think of those who never face this demand. They coast. They live in the soft rhythm of enough. And because they never had to run, they never discover the second gear within them. That's why so many with privilege, with early starts, with comfort plateau. They never had the urgency that burns away their weakness. The late starter, if they commit, finds within themselves not only speed, but resilience. And that resilience, born out of necessity, makes them unstoppable. I remember working with a woman in her late 50s who had finally decided to write the book she had been dreaming about since her 20s. For decades, she'd told herself she wasn't ready, that she didn't have the time, that she needed more confidence. But as she reached the later chapters of her life, she realized she couldn't wait any longer. And when she finally started, she wrote with a ferocity I rarely see in younger writers. She woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, wrote for hours, studied relentlessly, edited ruthlessly. Within 18 months, she not only finished her book, but landed a publishing deal and impacted thousands of readers. Why? Because she knew she had to run twice as fast. Her urgency fueled her execution. But here's a deeper truth. Running twice as fast is not only about achieving external goals. It's about redeeming your soul. When you push yourself to make up for lost time, you silence the voice of regret. Regret is the heaviest burden the brain can carry. Studies in cognitive neuroscience showed that regret lights up the same neural networks as physical pain. And yet, unlike physical pain, regret doesn't heal on its own. It festers. The only antidote is action. When you sprint forward, when you reclaim time with intensity, you convert regret into momentum. The very thing that once weighed you down becomes the fire that propels you forward. And yes, it will hurt. Growth always hurts. Rewiring old patterns is not a gentle process. You will sweat, you will stumble, you will feel like quitting, but understand this. Pain is proof you are in motion. Discomfort is evidence that you are rewiring. Every sore muscle, every late night, every rejection, every sacrifice, these are the receipts you are paying for the years you lost. And the beautiful thing about paying that price is this: once paid, you own the result outright. Nobody can take from you what you've built in urgency. Let me also speak to the fear that paralyzes late starters, the fear of failure. You think, what if I run twice as fast and still fall short? What if I waste the little time I have left? That fear is natural, but is also a trap. Because failure is not the enemy of the late starter. Inaction is. Failure still moves you forward. Every mistake, every misstep, every wrong turn still teaches your brain, still strengthens your circuits, still refines your path. Inaction teaches you nothing. Inaction cements regret. If you're going to fear anything, fear standing still. Fear arriving at the end of your life and realizing you never even tried to sprint. And here's the paradox. The late starter who dares to run often ends up accomplishing more than the early starter who coasted, because urgency multiplies focus, and focus multiplies results. I've seen people in their 50s build businesses in 5 years that outpaced what others struggled to build in 20. I've seen people who ignored fitness for decades transform their bodies in 2 years to a level their peers never reached. I've seen people who wasted half their life create art, impact, and legacy in their final decades that make their earlier years look irrelevant. That's the power of doubling your speed. But do not romanticize it. This is not a poetic journey, it is a war. A war against your habits, your excuses, your patterns, your comfort. A war against the inertia that whispers for you to slow down. A war against the part of your brain that wants to cling to the old life you must leave behind. Every day you sprint is a day you are fighting for your future. And you must fight with the intensity of someone who knows time is not on their side. Let me leave you with something deeply personal. Imagine for a moment your future self. Not the self you fantasize about, but the self you will actually meet 10 years from now if you keep living the way you are now. Picture them, tired, disappointed, carrying the weight of wasted years. Now imagine a different version of you, the version who decided to sprint, the version who ran twice as fast, who lived with urgency, who refused to die with regret. Which version do you want to meet? Because one of them is waiting for you. The choice is not abstract, it is real, and it is made every single day. Ladies and gentlemen, life is not fair and time is not merciful, but both bend to the one who runs with urgency. The one who starts late may have to run twice as fast, but in that sprint, they discover a strength, a focus, and a resilience that those who started early may never know. If that is you, if you are behind, stop mourning the delay. Stop resenting the past. Stop waiting for permission. Start sprint. And don't stop until you look around and realize you're not behind anymore. You're ahead. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter when you start. It only matters how fast you're willing to run once you do. And the question that remains, the only question that matters is this: are you ready to run?